business or are you running a business? Valuation is the ultimate KPI.
Hey there, it's Mike Langford. Welcome to another episode of the Modern Financial Advisor podcast, brought to you by Truelytics, the one and only comprehensive advisor transition management platform. This week on the show, Kieran Bol, head of platform operations at PriceMetrix by McKinsey, is with me for what, if I might be so bold, might just be the most important podcast episode of this show to date. But Mike, you may be thinking, all the episodes of the Modern Financial Advisor podcast are amazing. How can this episode be more important than the others? Well, here's the thing. Kieran and his team analyzed the data from 70,000 financial advisors over the past decade. And one of the big things that jumps out from that analysis, most advisors are not growing their business. Most aren't adding any new clients or any new assets on a regular basis. And that lack of growth affects everything, including your valuation, which is something we talk a lot about on this show. It affects your prospects for M&A activity, for succession. So this is a really big deal. When you strip away market performance, the industry really isn't growing all that much. And that is something worth discussing. So we did. Before we get to that discussion, please make sure you subscribe to the podcast. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, SoundCloud, the YouTubes, or wherever you like to get your podcast jam on. And if you have a question or a suggestion for a topic or a guest for the show, please feel free to hit us up. podcast@truelytics.com, or swing by the website and use that little contact form, or hit Ian Cardell up down in that little chat button on the bottom there. He always loves to hear from you and say, hey, having a great time. I want to talk about this on the show. Make sure you shine a light on it, okay? All right, that's it. Let's get to the conversation with Kieran Bol. Kieran Bol, wonderful to see you again, buddy. Welcome to the Modern Financial Advisor podcast.
Good to be here. Thanks for having me.
I know. I'm so excited to have you. I'll have to say, I've been doing podcasting since 2007. And this show, the Modern Financial Advisor podcast, we've been running for several years now. And I have to tell you, you are like one of my favorite guests I've had of all time. And I'm not just saying that to pump you up. We had such a great banter over on the Augmented Advisor podcast that we produce for Blue Leaf as well. Mm-hmm. So I'm thrilled to bring you to this audience.
Yeah, no worries. Glad I could help. Yeah. New audiences, new fans.
Yeah, it's great. It's great. So we're gonna blow some people's minds today with this show, I think, because you and I were. Well, actually, I read the study that you and the team at PriceMetrix by McKinsey produced called the State of the North American Retail Wealth Management Report. And it's an annual report you did. Earlier this year was, I think, the 10th anniversary of producing that report, if I'm not mistaken. And there was one stat in there that like literally leapt off the screen to me. I'm like, oh, that's huge. And some alarm bells should probably be going off. And I'm not sure if they are, but if the executives at broker-dealer firms or large asset managers and the like are listening, this may do it. And the stat was 75% of AUM growth in recent years has come from market performance.
That's right.
So, yeah, basically advisors are adding very few new clients or new assets from their existing clients. So let's dive in there. What are your thoughts? Or what were your thoughts when you first saw that stat? Did you kind of go, wow, this industry is really reliant on the market performance or growth? That needs to change? Or where were your thoughts?
Yeah, it's kind of incredible, right? When you take away, this market has been growing, like rocket fuel, right? The last couple of years, we saw advisor, kind of growth rates around 8%. But then you knock off the market and it becomes like 1 or 2%. And you're saying, wait, this sounded like something amazing, and now it's kind of anemic. You're talking about just kind of covering inflation. What's going on there? And you peel back the hood, and some of it is this like, especially, I think about what the industry is or touts to be. These are rainmakers, right? This is a hunter killer. I'm just going to grab some new households. Put them under my wing, manage them. And that's what it's kind of keep what you kill, right? And that's at least what it was. But, this is kind of a bit of a sign of the times, right? For most advisors, they're 50 years old. Most advisors have quite a large number of clients under their belt. Do they need to go, hunt that next one? Not really. And with the market growing like it is, like there's just that need to do it again. They say, you know what, maybe I don't need this next client. And that's kind of what it comes down to, right? Like there's just, I know what to do, but I don't know if I really need to do it again. Yeah. So that's what you get.
It's really been fascinating to me. I've been in this industry for almost all of my career, right? Mm-hmm. And there's a couple of elements at work here that are fascinating. So even before reading your report, I have a friend of mine who's a CEO of a relatively large financial firm here in Austin, Texas, and he was telling me years ago, he's like, Mike, the free money train is going to end sometime soon. And he was talking about, listen, we're getting growth. I mean, every year our business grows, whether we add any clients or not. We're just making more money, so that, that doesn't happen forever. The markets don't go up everyone. So that was one thing. And the other thing that just dawned on me is, and I've kind of known this, is that, once you hit a certain level, it's easy to get a little complacent, right? Like if you're making $300,000 a year, it's kind of easy to keep making $300,000 a year and play a lot of golf. It's crazy.
Yeah, you got it. I mean, there's at least two things there. One is, the last couple of years, the market has only gone up. So I think there hasn't really been a wake-up call yet. I am wondering what happens when there is a correction, even just a flattening, just 0%. We're not even talking about negatives. How many advisors are truly aware that a lot of their growth is from the market? It's not from, the gathering new clients, deepening relationships. And when they start seeing that decrease, it's going to be, a bit of a filter event, I'll call it, where someone will say, oh, I need to go and hunt out again. And do I know how to do that? And wait a minute, all my clients are old and they're actually in drawdown mode. This is not the best time for me to do this again. And then I think a lot of people are also going to look for maybe transitions out. They say, I'm not sure if I need to do this again. I think once that, it's going to happen probably where the market kind of creates the need to take a evaluation of your book, when that happens.
That's a really interesting point, and I didn't think of it, it actually may spur people to think about transitions at time, because any muscle that's not exercised atrophies over time, right? Like if we all know this. I mean, I do some weight training. I'm not like Mr. Jack, but I do some, right? And if I don't work out for like a few weeks, whatever, life gets in the way. Wow, you're surprised at how weak you are when you get back in the gym and start trying to throw some weights.
Well, one thing I would say, and this is for both industries, physical fitness as well as wealth management, there's a big difference between going to the gym once a week and no times a week, right? You do want to keep, even if you're in first gear, just keeping the engine on, keeping it humming, I think pays a lot of dividends. It just greases the groove, if you know that phrase from weightlifting, keeps it going. Being in park, not going to the gym, not looking for new clients, it's much harder to get that engine starting again. So it's something to keep in mind.
It's really true, and it's interesting. We hear this, and I've heard this for a decade plus. That most advisors will tell you when you ask them, where do you get your new clients from? Well, we get all our clients from referrals.
Yeah.
Well, what are you doing to spur new referrals, right? And so if you're getting comfortable and you're not actively marketing and you're not actively out there selling, even like you said, in first gear, you've got some process in place where you at least once or twice a month, you're sitting down with a new prospect or something.
Yeah.
And if you don't have that machinery in place, it's going to be problematic if you need to ramp it up, especially when, one other thing you talked about is like some of your client base as advisors age might be entering drawdown phase.
Yeah.
Well, the other thing that I think we're all aware of when we look at it from a macro view, and advisors may not see this at their micro view, is that, listen, attrition will happen. Nobody keeps all their clients and all their assets forever. At some point in time, a client will leave you. Even if all of your clients have been with you for 20 years, at some point in time, one of them may pass away, they may get divorced. They just may decide to move and like, you know what, I want somebody closer to my house or whatever. Something's going to happen. You're going to lose a client. And if you have not been in the process of making sure that you keep filling the bucket a little bit, and also we have that down market or flat market, you're not going to have the ability to recover that revenue as quickly as you want. So be mindful of that.
That's right. There is a little bit of you're swimming in a river, it has a bit of a current against you, right? You just have to keep moving forward a little bit, often enough, just a few clients. And yes, generally when you ask an advisor, do you have any attrition? They say absolutely not. And then under the hood, generally there's a little bit of attrition each year, and that's okay. That's natural. And you just have to naturally balance that scale with a little bit of growth. The one thing though you did mention is demographics. Consider, that is kind of like the engine of growth, and a lot of advisors have taken that, maybe if either directly as a focus or by accident, you take clients that are similar to your age and you ride that wave, upwards, right? You start when they're 45, they're in accumulation years, they're in, kind of peak earnings, 50, 55, now they're looking towards retirement, even more savings. These are all great, life stages for a client to be in, but maybe now they're in drawdown mode, 65. Yeah. And the market has kind of maybe hidden a little bit of that shift over to that drawdown phase. And that just means the river is coming at you a little bit faster. You have to swim a little bit, against it, even just to stay in the same pace, because they are continuing to draw down, and that's just going to just increase more and more. Yeah. So it's one thing to just really keep in mind is that demographics, that engine can work for you or against you depending on where you are in that book.
Yeah. This is all a great way of setting the stage here, but I wonder if we could dig a little bit deeper into some of the stats here. So, we had the blanket stat that, 75% of the growth is from the market performance and so forth. And I think we've done an adequate job of letting people know, like, hey, you need to focus on growth, have some there. But I imagine if we dig a little deeper into your stats, there are obviously some advisors who are probably growing rapidly, right? In RIA firms that are growing rapidly, while others are shrinking, right? So that drawdown mode you talked about, right? And then we got I think probably the very big wide middle of folks who are kind of relatively flat. What kind of distribution did you see in the data? I mean, and just to let folks know who are unaware of how the study was conducted, you have direct data from 70,000 financial advisors on your system. So you didn't just like pull that, this wasn't a survey that said, hey, 75% of growth is coming. This is like, no, we can see you. We know what's happening. Data, right? That's right. So this is real stuff. So what kind of like spread are we seeing here in the distribution of advisors who are growing versus flat and shrinking?
Yeah. So, and just, holding on for 1 sec on what kind of data we're looking at here, you're absolutely right. About 70,000 advisors in North America. We have monthly feeds. We are very granular in the kind of data that we look at for every advisor, every account, the type of account, the revenues, the assets. This is not a survey where you ask advisors, how are they growing? We're actually looking at their actual growth rates. We're looking at what the market effect was. Very helpful to know what's going on, and sometimes also to ask advisors, hey, what do you think is going on? To ask clients, what your perceptions are. Marrying up those different levels, we find that we can add like a lot of value, a lot of insight there. In terms of distribution, I mean, generally, obviously, there's a wide swath. We like to carve up the industry into, kind of 4 different buckets. Generally, this is all about life stage, first of all, right? When you're younger and you have lower assets, you're probably going to have to grow faster. We do see that a lot, right? There's kind of like a rookie structure, and you must grow or you will exit out of the industry one way or the other. Right. And so, for an area there, I think that's a bit obvious that there's going to be some growth. There are maybe the other side of it, which is kind of like your rock star. They always keep growing. No matter what, they're amazing. No matter what level of assets they have, they know what's going on. They're thinking about their business. They're thinking about their value proposition, what clients that would resonate with that. And then you have these like 2 other groups, right? And one of them we label it kind of complacent. They have assets. They never really had a breakout year where they had this amazing growth and they made it to the next level. So they're kind of just floating on by. They have maybe some structures in place on everything, and they're typically like a solo shop. They like their life stage that they're in. And then there's the other side, which is what we call advisors that are enough. Like we have this enough category. They're really big. They probably were rock stars. They were those rookies. They've got, a very nice, comfortable lifestyle, but they don't really feel the need to grow again, right? It's all about ability and motivation. They have the ability, but they don't see the need to grow. Yeah. And what we find is that over time, that enough category has just grown and grown and grown over years. More and more assets are managed by those advisors that don't need to grow again. They can, but they don't see it that way.
It's so understandable, right? I mean, so before we click the record button, I was telling you about I'm going to go see my daughter play basketball tonight. Mm-hmm. And I have a son who's also a teenager in high school, and it's one of those, hey, having a lifestyle business is a good thing, right? Like you get to a point where you're making really good money. Mm-hmm. It affords you the nicer things in life. You get to travel, you get to live in a nice community, you drive a nice car, whatever. But the nature of a financial advisory business is such that it also gives you some pretty good flexibility on time, right? I mean, you're open when the market's open for the most part, but look, you could take time off to go see your daughter play basketball and not worry about a financial advisor emergency. Like there's relatively few. And so it's understandable that if to your point, if you're in that early phase, you grow your business rapidly, you get to a point where you're making really good money, that might be the time when you're starting your family and the family's kind of coming into form and so forth. And it's really easy to get into that comfort level there. So it's actually pretty understandable that somebody might navigate into that lifestyle business and stay there.
Yeah. I mean, and again, it depends on what you want as the advisor. If you're interested in growing again, there are some steps you can take and we can talk about that. But if you're not, and a lot aren't, a lot see that kind of work-life balance as a plus. There's a few things you can do to kind of maintain and make sure that, nothing kind of slips off the rails, but it is a relatively easy lifestyle. The challenge is if you're, an executive at a firm and you're like, oh, why aren't my advisors growing? Well, some of that isn't just like, well, here's the plan, say here, advisor, this is what you need to do. It's like, well, what happens if they just don't care to do it? I mean, that's a separate problem, right? That's a motivation problem, not a playbook problem. And that's something that I don't think like every firm kind of understands, that there's a really big part of the issue, which is just thinking about incentives, getting people to grow from that level, that lens.
I love that you brought that up because I've had the great fortune of coming in and speaking to the audiences for lots of broker dealers, wirehouses over the years. And usually they bring me in and I speak at their top performer conference, right? They'll have their president's club or their whatever they call it. And it's usually anywhere from the top 10% to the top 15% of advisors at that firm. So, and like a lot of things, right? There's a Pareto distribution, right? 20% of the advisors are creating 80% of the value. Just like 20% of your clients, financial advisor are probably creating 80% of the revenue and actual value for your business. And so these advisors get showered with all the cool perks. They're getting, have the conference is always at the Ritz-Carlton or some sort of awesome beach resort or something like that. Any type of new program that comes into the organization, these guys and ladies get it first, right? Type of thing. But I know a lot of the practice management professionals out there are like, hey, we'd give anything to help that middle bucket, help these people compete. And what you seem to be indicating is that some of it is it's motivational, right? It's not about them not knowing that they need to grow. It's important.
Yeah, we do talk a lot about the movable middle, right? Like there's some people that are your rock stars and they already know it, and you should, to be fair, give them the accreditations and all of the perks because that does fuel a lot of people. But then there's this, what's the second tier? The people that you feel with a little nudge, and that's what we're talking about. Like a little nudge can actually get out of and maybe move into a second gear in terms of growth. Ballpark, the recipe is something like information, competition, and coaching. That's what we talk about a lot. Some people just don't even realize that they are growing or not growing. Hey, did you realize that a few of your clients left? And they say, absolutely not. And they say, well, what about Susie and what about Tom here? And they go, well, that's for various, that's a one-off. It's like, well, what about the previous year? And some of it is just give people information, find out how are you growing? What is your target for growth? These kind of things can sometimes kickstart it. if you want to go a little bit further, you say, well, did you know that on average, the branch you're in is growing at 6% and you're growing at 4%? You know, did you know that advisors close that look like you are actually growing at 8%, so your 7% doesn't look as good?
Yeah.
Because again, the market floats all boats. So a little bit of competition there. And yes, some of it is going to be on coaching. And there really is the high value but high touch kind of one-on-one. What is your plan for your business? What's your value proposition? What's your target client? How are you segmenting it? Okay, how do you make that real in your business? And a lot of advisors, I think, have thoughts around it, but it needs a little bit of polish, what it comes down to, right? And what exactly am I trying to target, and who's outside that zone? What are losses versus regrettable losses? These kind of things that kind of just focus their attention on where they really resonate in terms of value.
Yeah. And I think that conversation is so important about, why growth is important, right? I've said on this podcast before, if you're not growing, you're likely shrinking and you don't realize it. You are losing some clients occasionally. You are losing an account or here and there or whatever. Because attrition happens. It's a reality of life. You will at some point in time lose some business. So if you don't have any plan for growth, even if it's small, like steady state growth in your mind, like I constantly need to be bringing on some level of assets, and having that better information, as you described, like having the conversation with your advisor population, like, hey, here's how much of your growth last year was attributable to the market. Like 75%, or in some cases, for advisor, it might be like all of your revenue growth was due to the market. You literally brought on no new assets. You brought on no new clients. So everything that you saw, any increase in your fees was due to the market. And what if the market went south? How would that affect your business? Just being able to see that just seems like an important conversation with an advisor, right?
Just a bit of a wake-up call. That's right.
Yeah, just so you know. And some advisors might be comfortable with that, but I suspect that, if we're talking about that movable middle you're describing, is these are not professionals who are just kind of just getting by, right? These are likely folks who make several $100,000s a year. These are very well-paid professional folks. They've worked very hard to build the business to where it is. They care deeply for their clients. But, they're probably closer, do you think, to breaking into that top performer territory. I wonder if you've seen anything as you look at the population, like any kind of patterns in the advisors themselves. I mean, I think you may have touched on the edges here, but whether it's advisor demographics, like you kind of hinted like, okay, there's a demographics of the early stage advisor. They could be young, they could be career changers, but they're fast growing because they have to get the business up and running. But are there other things that you see? I'm not sure if your data presents this, that says, hey, these advisors are going to grow faster? Is it an age thing, or is it a years in business thing that tells you, or is there? I guess I'm not sure if I'm asking my question correctly, but are there other patterns beneath the surface that you notice?
Yeah, I mean, there are some. Both kind of quantitative and qualitative ingredients for growth that we see. And first of all, again, life stage matters. If you're younger, no matter how much assets you manage, typically younger advisors or advisors earlier in their second career will grow a little bit faster. I think it's a little bit more hungry. And more assets usually means lower growth. It's not always. Everything's broad brush here, but to go from 10 clients to 11 is different from 100 clients to 110, right? It does matter, like these terms of scale, the problems and challenges you have. But beyond that, it does kind of come down to a couple, it's all about capacity. It's all about your value proposition. It's about segmenting your clients. There are some, on the quantitative end, I love teaming, team up with your, not exactly your friend, but your colleague who does things well and not exactly the same as you do. Maybe one of you is the rainmaker, and maybe the other person is the cultivator, someone who, specializes in financial planning or has a brilliant network in terms of other experts that they can bring on. Everything to grow capacity there. So that's also just depth of relationship, making sure you manage a few clients really well, not every client, just to make sure that you have the capacity to grow, right? Let's assume that you have that motivation to grow. Do you have the time to do so? So making sure you're focused there. And then the next question
Yeah.
is, okay, well, who do you focus on? You got to have, at some point, I mean, early on, it's whoever picks up the phone, is who you bring on board. You know, call your friend, call your sister, call your brother, call your dog, call your grandma. It doesn't really matter. Just bring them on board. And at some point, it's, okay, wait a minute. I'm now getting high in capacity, and I need to think about capacity. Okay, that's over there. But also, who is my target client? What does that look like? I think you have some podcasts on niches. I'm very pro niches. And maybe you're the dentist guy, or maybe you're the you run in the antique car circles. Whatever if whatever it is, understand. Okay, why would someone come to me and not someone else? Okay, let's double down on that, because that's where I find a lot of my value resonates. Let's be refined on that value proposition. Understand exactly what kind of client I'm targeting, and then depending on pare down a little bit, right? If you really are stretched for capacity, you might want to think about those that are outside it and considering exiting in some way, or just generally know when a client's on the fence. Okay, is this a client that you really want to keep because it's part of your core, or is it a little outside? And then maybe you don't fight for that one that's thinking about leaving. That can save a lot of capacity, honestly, because there are those little fights every day, every week. Think about regrettable losses versus losses.
Yeah, it's interesting. You touched on the niche thing. And first of all, you touched on the early on in their careers, everybody's just like, anybody who can fog a mirror and has a little bit of money, I'll take you as a client because I need clients. And it's very true. By the way, that's the way broker dealers and wealth management firms recruit advisors too. If you can fog a mirror and you're willing to try to become a financial advisor, congratulations, you're in the training program for the most part. It's just the way that this industry has always worked. And it makes sense. I think lots of other industries work that same way, by the way. But getting to the niche part, it's funny, you talked about motivation earlier as in on the practice management teams, like how do we motivate advisors to keep growing and move up? Shifting to a niche is actually a great way to do it because it energizes you. So as an example, before we started talking, you talked about you and your wife bought a Jeep, right? So you're going to doing some adventure stuff. And hopefully that's not too private to reveal to the world. So the Jeeper community is off the hook. Like people really get into going off road and doing all these cool adventures. And if you decide I'm going to be the financial advisor of the Jeeper community in my area, you'd be way more energized about growth, right? You're out there with your people and you're doing it. And of course they all know you're a financial advisor and you're going to probably pick up some clients and you're probably going to love talking to those clients, and the referral engine is probably going to be pretty high, right? I would imagine, just because it's not that much work. I'm actually having fun while I'm doing this.
That's exactly right. And good pun with engine, by the way. And yes, feel free to yell from the mountaintops. I'm a Wrangler guy now. I have a rig. This is the word that is used in these circles. I have a rig. Unfortunately, it is stock for now. Come see me afterwards for when I get the lift kit and the winch. But
that's awesome. I can't wait to see it.
You're totally right. It's about kind of like passion and energy. If you have an area that you like to double down in, go for it, right? That is if it provides energy as well as that expertise, I think you can find something that resonates.
Yeah, totally. So by the way, I'm a little envious of you and your Jeeping ways, by the way. I one of the kind of jokes for me personally is like, once I'm an empty nester, my wife and I will be buying some sort of vehicle that has no practical application in life other than it's fun as heck. I mean, I have a sports sedan, Mercedes that I drive, and it's a lot of fun, but there's a lot of practicality to it too. It's still 4 doors. And occasionally I have to throw some kids in the back. So I am a little envious for you. There'll be some toys coming soon.
Yeah. I mean, my Wrangler has 4 doors too. You can take the doors off.
Take the doors off, right? And then you can put those badass, like armored looking doors, right? They're kind of, they're still technically a door. So you don't get, like, I would be so afraid that I'd fall out if I had the door all the way off. I know I'm belted in, but I'd just be like Mr. Paranoid, big baby. I want to shift gears. So actually, we're in the lifestyle conversation about enjoy what things we like to do. I want to come back to our lifestyle advisors. And the reason why I want to do that is I don't, and you said this, there's no shame in having a lifestyle business, but recognize you have a lifestyle business that, hey, this business allows me to do the things I want. I go jeeping. I spend a lot of time going to basketball games or whatever with my kids. I get to play a crap ton of golf. I work 30, 40 hours a week. I make really good money in a relatively stress-free environment. Life doesn't suck for me, Mr. or Mrs. Advisor, right? The big trick to a lifestyle business, though, is stability. I've talked to a few heads of practice management around the industry, and that's one of their laments is that some of their advisors are living a $500,000 lifestyle, right, with a $400,000 kind of revenue stream. I'm like, and so they're at great risk for kind of some instability, right? So if you want a business, now first of all, you should always spend below your means, but even if you are spending at your means or below your means, there's still some risk in there because of the markets up and down. I wonder if you've seen anything and you and your team have discovered that here are some advisors who are running very high quality lifestyle businesses, like things that make the business more stable. Have you seen anything in the data or kind of just in your talking to folks where this is what would make a much more robust lifestyle business?
I mean, yes. Again, this is let's paint the picture here that this is someone who has a certain amount of assets under management. Like they can afford the we're talking about pulling in $400K, something like that, right? This is not someone who's starting up. You're in a phase where you could take your foot off the gas, proverbially. It's someone who definitely knows their value proposition. It's very, very sharp, right? Someone who knows their client segmentation. And can come in there and especially has a niche that resonates with that new client, says, you know what, this is great. Like you can talk to some advisors and really within 30 seconds you go, wow, this person knows it. There's like the Picasso kind of anecdote. Someone walks by Picasso in a Paris, coffee shop, says, Picasso, can you paint me a sketch? He happens to have a pencil beside him, so he takes 30 seconds and goes, here you go. So this is amazing. He's like, okay, that's $1,000. Person goes, but it took you 30 seconds to do. He's like, no, it took me a lifetime to do.
Yeah.
Right. It's that idea of like, no, you've made it now. You're in this life stage where you don't have to grow again, but you do have a lot of wisdom and expertise, and you can provide that, with a lot of scale. So the question or the watch outs are just make sure that you are still communicating with your clients, right? Still remembering their key dates, and the kind of client segmentation that you're looking for. And that, again, you're swimming in a river. There is going to be a bit of a current. Keep looking for new clients. Keep looking for the clients that are part of your niche, but maybe also a little bit younger, because I expect if you're in that kind of high quality mode, you're a little bit older, just make sure that you can keep that pipeline moving forward and not keep looking at the same clients, the same demographics, and have that river keep flowing at you.
I like that. And I've actually talked about that recently with some other folks of like, you should consider staggering your client roster with ages, because, as you get older, if your client roster is getting older, so think of it as like a bond ladder, right? You want different maturities in that portfolio of fixed income instruments. You don't want them all coming due at the same time. And this is great. Now I'm saying I'm going to pull a cash, but now I'm going to reinvest that cash, right? And it might be a way higher rate. So stagger your clients, get some young ones, get some older ones, and so forth. It's because the older ones will get into that negative net flows. And that's kind of like where I want to go next, which is you're amazing at the transitions, by the way, the segues. So one of the core concepts that we talk a lot about on this show is advisor transition. And some studies recently, one by a firm, said 40% of today's advisors are set to retire in the next decade.
Yeah.
And so we can expect to see a very high volume of successions, right, internal. And we can also expect to see probably a high volume of M&A activity. But one big risk for these retiring advisors is that their business will begin to decline as older clients begin to consume assets for their own retirement needs. And other client relationships due to adult children taking control of their affairs or death, unfortunately. But it happens, right? It just, as we talked about it a couple of times, attrition happens, assets, that asset pool will shrink. So, but you mentioned in kind of our notes back and forth in prep that 40% of advisors have negative net flows in their business. And I suspect a good portion of these advisors are a later stage in their careers. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you'll say that it's all across the thing. But have you seen any warning signs that an advisor or a practice management professional can look out for that would let an advisor know, hey, listen, there's some risk of you sliding into negative net flows?
Yeah. And it is everyone, but yes, it is more so skewed towards the older, the enough category. Hey, I'm working 30, 40 hours. This thing runs on its own, right? And just keeps on plodding forward. Well, a lot of that is, as we were talking about before, is a lot of that's market, right? And you kind of just need to make sure that you're in that first gear of attracting new clients, because there is a current against you that you may not see because the market is kind of hiding it a little bit right now. So keep moving that forward. So that's kind of like table stakes.
Yeah.
It's a great question about the check engine light, right? Like what are the kind of the markers that suggest something is, not all right here, something smells a little bit rotten. Couple things that come to mind, one of them is making sure you know all of your clients. And what I really mean there is not just, and I'm going to use broad brush, but often enough, especially in the older generation, there's a husband and wife combo, and the husband is the one making the decisions financially. And you, the advisor, have a core, deep relationship with that husband. You go golfing together, right? Take him to this antique car show, apparently, and you also go, jeeping on the weekend. That's probably the wrong verb.
It probably is the right verb.
Possibly. Someone's going to correct me. But maybe you don't know the wife. And what we've found is that's very, very common, that you don't actually have a strong relationship with the spouse or with the children. And this is one of those almost existential threats of eventually, no one likes to talk about it, but people do pass on. And more, it's the husband first. And you say, okay, well that's fine because the family knows me. Well, you really have to be sure. Like, do they? There are good tools to get deeper in. Financial planning is great. Set out the goals, the roadmap for the entire family. But what we've found is when a husband dies and the money is transferred to the widow wife now, 70% of that widow will leave their advisor within a year. And that's monumental, right? The transition, we all talk about this like massive intergenerational wealth transfer. Well, before the money transfers from the parents to the children, it's going to go probably from husband to wife first. Have you ever talked to the wife, usually, again, broad brush here? Have you talked to them? What are their goals? What are their financial, education, right? Do they really understand what you do, what you're there for? There are broad indicators that generally women are less financially confident. They're competent, but less confident. They like some advice. They are more goal setting. It's not about 8% return. It's, can I pay for my son's education, right? It's this kind of more structured planning. Many advisors, and especially on that, this has been going so well for the last 20 years, what do I need to do next? They haven't really thought about the fact of, are you deep in those families, those key clients on the other side where you really maybe aren't as familiar with? That'd be number one. Do you have relationships with the full family around key clients?
That is, I think, huge. So good.
No, 70%. It's monumental. It's going to happen. Don't let it happen to you. Okay.
Yeah. Hold on to your next one, because I just want to let people know, we had Laura Gregg on a few episodes ago. It was an episode about diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Yeah.
And she and her team over at FlexShares, Northern Trust FlexShares ETFs, they did a study on DE&I. And they found that many advisory firms are starting to get more serious about women, focusing on women and attracting women investors. So that's really smart stuff. But she went into some detail about experiences that women often have with advisors. Exactly what you're talking about: limited relationship with the advisor because the advisor seems to talk to the client. They'll say things like, I recently went out to dinner with my client and his wife. It's like, isn't the wife your client, right? Or when they're sitting there and they're talking to the advisor, interviewing the advisor, they talk directly to the husband and then occasionally glance to the wife. And she was talking about her own experience. Like, she's been in financial services for 25 years. And the advisor tried to explain to her like what some of these, basic financial terms are. She's like, I'm in the business. What are you doing to me? Like, don't talk down to me. So she offers some really, really good, so go check out that episode there. So, because it really leans into exactly what you're talking about. And that 70% number is huge. Think about how many of your clients are married. And if you don't have a good relationship or a firm relationship, warm and confident relationship with a spouse, that's a huge risk number. Yeah, absolutely. So okay, let's go to the next one. This is great.
So the next one, which is somewhat related, just on kind of like client feedback, in effect, there are things like Net Promoter Score. Effectively, do you talk to your clients and ask for feedback, ask for advice on what you could do better? In effect, do you have some really powerful teams, and by powerful I mean just really well-run teams? Have even a client advisory board. Here's some key clients. Here's what I'm planning to do next time. What are some of the needs and challenges that you have that maybe we don't have right now? Maybe I should bring a lawyer on next year, something like that. Any sort of client feedback, just to know what kind of state they're in. Very, very helpful, right? And then you talk about, okay, what are the levers to move if clients are unhappy? But just even having a pulse on, are they okay? Are they not okay? Because obviously, that's how your bread gets buttered, right? Your clients being happy. And this does dovetail with the transition discussion. There's obviously, good, better, best ways of transitioning from one advisor to the next. But from a client perspective, let's imagine a client is a little bit unhappy with you. It is a lot of effort to move. So most people will not. But then, Mike's retiring, and this guy Kieran's taking over. How do I really know Kieran? I didn't really love Mike to begin with. Maybe now is the time to switch. Yeah. And so when you start moving that transition over, and then suddenly there's a lot more attrition than you thought, maybe there was something that was already a little bit, underneath the surface, not quite right. And it's those kind of client feedback, making sure all your clients are happy, especially your key clients, having a voice for them that can communicate back to you what they want. I mean, that is really, really powerful. And that's a good check to make sure that you're running a really strong business.
I love that, the Net Promoter Score type concept. And it doesn't have to be that formal, like, let me try to get an actual score, because most advisors are not sitting there with thousands of customers and so forth and trying to get, let me look at the total population. You can do little things like, I learned this interview technique really early on in my career, and you can use it in the sales process, and you can adapt this type of question, but it's usually at the end of the interview, you say, well, Kieran, this has been a fantastic conversation. Just want to make sure, like, after all of the conversation we've had and so forth, do you see any reason why I wouldn't be the best candidate for a job or great candidate for this job, right? And it's basically asking the person, like, if they say no, like, you're awesome, great, that they're really happy. But this is an opportunity for them to go, well, one thing we didn't cover was this, right? It's like, get in the habit of asking, are you happy? And then talking to them about what's going on in their lives and their business, and what do they think they're missing, or what's making them nervous, right? Asking them, like, what are the things that they're uncomfortable with in their current financial future, or how their finances are tracking their life, can surface things, right? It's the old, the sales thing that people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Like, show them you care a little bit. Yeah, it's hokey, but it is.
But that's your differentiator, versus the online algorithm is that you have that personal high touch feel, right? You remember their birthdays, you remember their graduations, you remember that they love opera, and so you send them some tickets every once in a while. Those little gifts, just amazing in terms of the return you get for those kind of, I remember you, and I'm just telling you how much I care. But and then have a little bit of feedback. Was this useful for you? Was this conversation helpful? Like, anything I could do for you to kind of help, yada yada yada.
We're coming in kind of rounding third, heading for home here on this conversation, but I think that is such an important thing. They are there for the relationship. I mention it all the time on the show. It's like, listen, every other financial advisor out there sells the same products you do, same stocks, bonds, and mutual funds. Basically, they charge about the same price you do. Right? They have relatively same education as you do. Right? So basically, it's a relatively commoditized service when you look at it on paper. They're choosing you because of you, because of the way you make them feel, that they feel confident in their financial future. Like they related with you, they chose you. Make sure they keep choosing you, right? Make sure, remind them of why they chose you just by diving in deeper on those relationship builders. Last thing I wanted to talk to you about, and we hinted at it a little bit here, is M&A, right? So while most of our conversation here has been on organic growth or lack thereof, unfortunately, we're seeing advisors, many of them, turn to M&A for their growth activity, right? They're like, I'm just going to acquire another book of business, or I'm an RIA. We've got an RIA firm, small one. We're going to go buy another RIA firm. What M&A trends are you and your team finding most interesting as you look across that gigantic population you have visibility into?
Yeah, so I think a lot of this is kind of spurred by the growth of the RIA space, which is just crazy amounts of growth in the last couple of years. And there are some reasons for that. Partly, it's right back to the top of this podcast. It's about where are advisors right now. And it's a lot of advisors that are looking for that transition. You're looking for maybe retirement. RIA is a bit easier to make it, to see the end game, right? To have your book on the open market and kind of start thinking about exiting. But generally speaking, especially in the RIA area, there is a lot more freedom, a lot more independence you have versus in a big firm where they provide you a lot, but they also expect a lot. And if you are someone who isn't looking for that next tier of growth and is maybe looking for what we talked about before, I want a high quality lifestyle business. Well, maybe I don't want the pressure. I want to run totally independently. Maybe I'll just move on over to the RIA type space.
Yeah.
And that also might mean, I'll be willing to accept moving into a new team, or selling my book to an old one. And to be fair, I'm very bullish on teams. I think teams are great. Specialization is great. It holds people accountable. Usually there's a little bit more goal setting because you actually just have to write things down. Everything is just really, really powerful there. So, and then there's another option or another reason why there's just much more M&A is because we have seen that net new assets are hard to come by. And if I want to grow and I feel that the way, what does a quality book mean to me? Well, it means more revenue. There's a little bit of a knee-jerk reaction. Okay, I'll just find someone else that is looking to sell their book. I'll move on and grab their clients and just grow in that way. The fear there that I would have is the niche could be totally different. Your client segmentation is totally different. Your value proposition could be totally different. Be very careful about what you're purchasing.
Yeah.
And understand what the demographics of that book. It's not just, it has this much assets and this much revenue. What will that look like 5-10 years from now? Is there something a little bit off there? Look for Net Promoter Score as well.
Yeah.
Making sure that those clients do, move on over and not actually leave in a way that you did not expect.
Yeah. We talk about that frequently. The cultural fit is so important, right? It's like, it can look great on paper, but to your point, similar target markets, right? Similar investment process style, right? Similar style of, the way you interact with your clients and so forth. So important. This has been fantastic. This is awesome. I love having you on. So you got to have you on more often. We're going to dig into more of these topics here. What are you guys working on? Can you give us a hint on any of the new stuff coming down the pipe? Like, what's the next study that you're working on? analysis?
Financial planning, I would say, would be without question. More and more, we see that financial plans are just great. I mean, they so much depth, communication. It allows you to structure your value proposition. I mean, most people, I'm sure every advisor who's listening has a value proposition that's really, you could, cut paper with, but often it needs a little bit of refinement. The financial plan is a way to kind of articulate that, put it on paper, present it to the client, have the client receive that value and feel it. We don't have, a complete data set that says exactly what the benefits are from an advisor perspective of doing financial planning. But that one's coming. I just think there's just so many benefits there. Not every advisor does it, but everyone really should. It's a recipe for that success.
Yeah, I had Tony Steek on, who's the Chief Operating Officer President for Navaplan. Advised at Navaplan. They were just recently acquired by InvestCloud. I think that's who acquired them. And he was talking about financial. Now, he's got a vested interest in this because they make financial planning software. So take it with as it may. But financial planning is one of the last bastions of revenue stability. He called it, because it's like, listen, if you're doing it right, clients are going to pay you for the financial plan, right? You're not just going to kind of give away just an asset allocation model that meets their financial goals. This is like something you can be doing every single year, providing to your clients. They'll pay you for it. And then it allows you to understand them more completely, as you said, and you can discover other opportunities for growth, right? Whether it's extended family members or other needs they have, it could be insurance and so forth. So I think you're spot on with that, Kieran. Well, this has been fantastic, sir. So excited to have you on the show. People are going to want to follow up with you. What's the best way for people to reach out and follow up?
Basically, Google PriceMetrix probably would be the easiest way of doing that. You can take a look at our CA Retail Wealth. I think it's on our website. I'm sure we can have my email even in the chat somewhere as well.
Okay, cool. Very awesome. Well, thank you very much, sir. Wonderful having you on the show.
Likewise. Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much for listening to and or watching this episode of the Modern Financial Advisor podcast. It's always fantastic to have you with us. Huge props to my man, Kieran Bol from PriceMetrix by McKinsey. I have been looking forward to having him on the show to talk about this topic for months and months now, ever since I first read the analysis that he and his team did for the state of the North American retail wealth management market, the 10th annual version of that. I saw this little data point about 75% of growth is due to market performance. And I had kind of known that for years, but to see it done and see such a large quantitative analysis back up that hunch, if you will, was really, really impactful for me. And I'm like, we got to dig into this. And I was so grateful for him to come on the show. And I hope you got a lot out of this, and it spurs you to action, frankly. Take action on this analysis, right? Don't wait for the market to turn south or sideways or whatever and have it affect your business. Start thinking about ways to get growth moving. All right. As always, like I said at the top of the show, please do make sure you subscribe to the podcast on your favorite podcast platform and send those questions and suggestions in for guests. Podcast@Truelytics.com. Swing by Truelytics.com and use the contact form, the chat button, or hit us up on the socials. We're active on LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube, wherever you like to hang out and interact with the world. You can find us there, okay? Hope you're having a great day. Please be safe and be nice to each other. We'll see you next time on the Modern Financial Advisor podcast. See ya. Bye.